Hi, I'm Sid Blackmer. Welcome to Tales of the Wild West. The Old West was filled with legendary characters. Some like Wild Bill Hickok, Doc Holliday, Wyatt Earp, and Annie Oakley were celebrated over and over in books and film and music. Others, like Bill Tillman and Bass Reeves, for various reasons, were all but forgotten. But back in their time, the exploits of these lawmen were the stuff of legend. Our story today centers on one of the greatest of these forgotten lawmen, Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves was an African American, and the prevailing view of the early American press was not open to an American hero of color. Thus, sadly, Reeves' exploits received little of the plaudits given to his lighter-skinned contemporaries. But I assure you, he was as resourceful and respected a lawman as any of his peers. Let me take you back and tell you the tale of a most daring adventure pitting Bass Reeves against the notorious Brunter brothers.
Damn! Mr. Bass Reeves! How in the name of all that's holy are you?
Marshal Earp, I've been better. And I suspect I've looked better too.
At our age, we should simply avoid mirrors.
I've been chasing these Brunner brothers halfway across the territory, and I've yet to corral them.
The Brunters. Here.
I swear they are as elusive as snakes.
Well, if you don't mind the company, I'd like to help you find them. Maybe we could put them out of our collective misery.
I was hoping you'd say that. Mind sharing some of your coffee? Sad was the day McKinley died. The wagon broke down and the horses cried.
Cheers.
The Brunner brothers weren't cowards. Well, at least not in the normal sense of the word. I mean, they might shoot you in the back one day and then straight up gunfight you the next. They might steal your horse, leave you 50 miles from water. You know, that would be something they could possibly do. But then again, they may just walk right up to you and rob you. So, were they cowards? Some days yes, some days no. What they really were pushers. They pushed people, they pushed fate, they pushed temptation, they just pushed. They had no nuance in their life. And that lack of nuance led them to make some really bad decisions, especially on that fateful day when they ran into a lawman named Bass Reeves.
Let's split up, double our chances. They're either toward Dilson Caves or hole up near Pine Grove. Take Dilson, Wyatt. I'll head south to the Grove.
That's a deal. Let's say I meet you here in 2 nights or so.
And no heroics, Wyatt, if you spot 'em. Adios. Meet you back here in 2 mañanas.
Bass Reeves served for 32 years as Deputy U.S. Marshal in Native American territories, namely Oklahoma. He had a reputation for being fearless, and despite arresting over 3,000 felons and killing 14 outlaws in defense of his own life, he was never shot. It is said that several times his hat was shot off the top of his head. I've actually read accounts where different articles of his clothing had bullet holes in it. Like his duster would have a hole in it from a bullet, or his hat would get shot off. But he was never wounded in any of those gun battles. He always got his man. He arrested over 3,000 felons, and it's said that there's only one person that may have escaped being apprehended by Bass Reeves. He never shot a man when it wasn't necessary, and they hadn't tried to kill him first. He always acted in self-defense. Another thing about Bass Reeves is that he never changed his policies or his philosophies or his treatment of people based on race, ethnicity, even familial ties. Everybody was equal under the law. Not only did he arrest the minister who baptized him, he also arrested his own son after the young man murdered his wife in a fit of jealousy.
Don't shoot, Wyatt. It's me.
Well, ain't that something? Right there.
Yep.
I thought you said no heroics.
No choice.
Why the gag?
Talks too much.
Understood.
Any more complaints? You can join your neighbor.
So you gonna tell me what happened, or keep me hanging?
I ran into the brothers at the Grove. They was breaking camp, so there was no time for me to come get you. Joe here was feeling somewhat perplexed. Seems his horse disappeared, and he was still too much addled from all that rot gut. Joe was about 40 yards down over the hill. Jake and Bill was gathering up their gear, so I worked my way around to where the horses were tied, and I set them loose. They were cussing like sailors. Jake and Bill come up the hill right into my gun. I hands over the arrest warrant to Jake. He raises his long gun, and I drop that sucker right where he stood. And that gave Bill time to draw, but in his excitement, he shot low, hitting me in the belt buckle.
The belt buckle? You hurt?
Like the dickens. I got the bruises to prove it.
You don't have to show me. I mean,
I shot second. Bill left this world quick and easy. Our friend there hears the commotion, sobers up quick, sees me with my gun belt around my knees, rushes at me like a rank bull. And I'm standing there, gun empty, moving like a dance hall girl in a too-tight dress. When Joe gets over to me, I stop. I brace myself against a tree, and I club that sucker as hard as I
could. Shut up, Joe. You're ruining my picture.
Oh, no, Joe's right. That wasn't a very sporting thing for me to do. But frankly, Right about now, I ain't in a sporting mood. Just one more word.
You know, out in California, they're making moving pictures about the old days. Hell, they even called me to be a consultant. Tell my stories, they put it on a screen. You ought to get in on some of that action. I mean, this story here, you know, people ought to see this.
Forget it, Wyatt. Nobody puts a black man in a motion picture unless he's shining somebody's boots. And I ain't shined nobody's boots since 1865.
Well. Even still, this story here belongs in the flickers.
Sure, the day I wake up as a red-headed Irishman.
As you may know, Wyatt Earp became a Hollywood film consultant the last decade or so of his life. His stories, both historical and fictional, have been told on film hundreds of times. Bass Reeves' legend, however, has remained, for the most part, fallow. But history has a way of eventually finding its legends, especially when, like Bass Reeves, the legend needs no exaggeration. Come along for the ride next time. This is Tales of the Wild West. I'm Sid Black.
Gunslingers, gamblers, horse thieves, and cattle rustlers are an enduring part of the Old West. Some became celebrities in their own, often brief lives. Others faded into the dust of unmarked graves in Boot Hill. One such desperado was Caleb Earl Bateman, who wanted more than anything to be a household name like his hero, William H. Bonney, known to all as Billy the Kid.
Even though William Bonney, better known as Billy the Kid, had been dead for over a decade, it's entirely credible that Caleb Bateman was obsessed with walking in the young outlaw's footsteps. You see, Billy was a celebrity before Pat Garrett shot him in 1881, and his myth only grew after he was dead because the public simply couldn't get enough news, real or fabricated, about the likable young man barely out of his teens. Like so many other rebels in post-Civil War America, William Bonney became like a Robin Hood in the minds of many people, a loyal hand avenging the death of his murdered boss, a poor, misunderstood young man whose life was cut short. In other words, a hero.
Caleb Earl Bateman was born in Clay County, Missouri on September 10th, 1847. His father, Joshua Robert Bateman, left home when Caleb was 5. His mother, Alice, did her best raising Caleb, but she herself was quoted as saying, "That boy had the devil in him." The approach of the American Civil War shaped the life of Caleb Earl. At the age of 14, he joined the Confederate forces and learned the ways of Johnny Reb guerrilla tactics, stealing and bushwhacking to survive. Caleb killed his first man when he was just 15 years old.
Caleb Bateman became Billy the Kid, and just like Billy, he eventually crossed the wrong man.
Found him, Paul. Not 20 miles from here, near the old relay station.
I was just up on the wagon trail yesterday. Nary a sign.
Well, they didn't use the trail. They took them north through Creek Run, circled back, brought them around through the East Draw, near the reservation. Would have never found them if it wasn't for a stray they missed. We got them this time.
You get the men, you stay with your ma just in case.
Ain't likely, Paul.
In 1864, Cyrus and Rachel McCall, their 10-year-old son, and a few loyal hands drove 300 head of cattle from West Texas to settle in the newly formed Montana Territory. They endured frigid winters, angry miners, and hostile Indians to build a thriving cattle empire known as the Big Sky Ranch. Now, Cyrus McCall didn't get where he was by avoiding a fight, and he wasn't about to this time.
You get right behind that door, all right? And you shoot the first thing that isn't me.
Caleb Bateman had assembled a gang of thieves and killers who followed his orders without question. Among them was Silas Dobson, who was wanted in just about every state and territory west of the Mississippi, and Lemple Breen, who had been a Crow captive for over 10 years. And when a cavalry raid returned him to white society, he found its rules and restrictions intolerable. With Bateman, Breen found a way to act out his hatred for his own kind.
Caleb Bateman had become the most successful rustler in western Montana, with a ready market for stolen beef, which would bring maybe $15 a head, about half of a legal sale, and with not nearly enough cowhands to cover all the territory available. It was relatively easy to swoop in, grab up a few beeves, and be gone before a vulnerable rancher even knew what hit him. And maybe 50 or so head of cattle would bring a tidy sum to Bateman and his men, certainly enough to keep them in whiskey and women between raids. 50 head, however, to a cattleman could be disastrous. So really, it was just a matter of time until Bateman stole from the wrong man.
The West could be perilous for women. Pop culture, and I think film in particular, often shows women being taken captive by Indians or being forced into brothels in these cattle and mining boomtowns. But less well known is that they also often fell victim to gangs of outlaws, especially if the outlaws had a hideout that served as a base of operations. Women were needed for their domestic labor. Native American women who were captured by warring tribes, they might find themselves sold to outlaws or bartered for whiskey and weapons, or simply sold by their families. White women who lived on these isolated ranches, if their husbands were away from the house, they might very well find themselves kidnapped by the outlaws and taken into servitude. However they arrived into this captivity, their lives were really pretty grim. It was servitude and physical abuse.
As Cyrus and his men neared the abandoned relay station, they found no sign of the gang. In fact, there was no sign that anyone had been anywhere near Osage Station for years. Young Cyrus knew that a few hours ago he had found his cattle in a draw east of the station, but he had no idea what he and his father were up against. They were about to find out. This was far from the first time Cyrus McCall suffered wounds in an ambush, but an arrow this close to his spine was truly dangerous. Young Cy knew they had to make quick work of the rustlers, or he might lose his father.
right now. This here's a white woman. Now, none of y'all want to see her dead.
He was convinced that, like Billy, he could avoid capture by simply being bold and clever enough to make his pursuers hold fire.
Bateman tried to dress like him. He tried to create the same fearsome reputation as Billy the Kid. What I find really curious, though, is that patterning didn't carry over into his treatment of women. Billy the Kid could be quite charming with women. He enjoyed the company of women, and he could be very warm and generous with women. But Bateman was a cruel and abusive man by all accounts. In fact, Sarah Allen, when she wrote about her experiences years later, said he was just plain mean.
You get that big black you rode in on and bring him up here, now!
He knew that Sarah Allen would shield him, and if he could somehow get his hands on the lean black horse belonging to one of McCall's men, no one have a chance to catch him before he sought refuge in the mountains he knew so well. Little did he know that a dead man would be his undoing. Suffering a wound that would have killed most men, Cyrus McCall proved to be the last thing Caleb Bateman ever saw. That day, all but one of Bateman's men died, and that man explained exactly how Bateman had avoided capture for so long. Cyrus recovered and lived for another 10 years, gradually turning his Big Sky Ranch over to his son.
Caleb Bateman finally ended up in an unmarked grave somewhere in Montana. The shootout at Osage Station did make a few newspapers, but it was barely mentioned east of the Mississippi. I guess you could say Bateman finally crossed the wrong man.
Howdy, I'm John Gray, and welcome to Tales of the Wild West. The year was 1895, and the little town of Singletree, Montana, was celebrating its silver jubilee. Now, everyone within 20 miles of this little mining and cattle town would put their work aside today, get all dutied up, and head off to town just to cut that badger loose. Now, they had plenty of food and drink. They had a Pharaoh's tent, a medicine show, a big parade, and Sam and Gracie, local favorites, would perform. But the highlight of the day was a baseball game between a bunch of miners and ranch hands and a barnstorming professional team called themselves the Excelsior Aces. Now, no one in this town ever thought that a bunch of locals could compete with a professional team, but at the end of this day, winning and losing had nothing to do with baseball. For it would be published in newspapers as far as Baltimore that this was the day the Aces got trumped.
In the late 1860s, Singletree, Montana, was little more than a few tents and a cabin or two around Hiram Prouse Mine. The town got its name when Hiram's wagon broke a Singletree, forcing him to stop his westward journey in search of a new life. He took it as a sign and he staked his claim, and it wasn't long before other miners arrived, and by 1870, several permanent buildings had sprouted and the boomtown, appropriately named Singletree, was born. Unlike most boomtowns, Singletree flourished. The mines proved profitable, and it wasn't long before nearby ranchers found supplies and diversions in the little town. Within a year or so, Singletree boasted more than a saloon and an assay office. There soon was a livery, a general store, mortuary, boarding house, even a church and a school, and it helped take Singletree from boomtown to metropolis with culture and manners. Its status was cemented with the construction of a train station and the printing of the first issue of the Singletree Enterprise. News from back east was always popular, but nothing seemed as exciting for young and old alike as the sport of baseball.
In the western territory of Montana, cowboys were playing baseball as early as the year 1876. Baseball has been a staple of American culture since before the Civil War. Gene Autry even owned a baseball team. But did we ever see Roy Rogers hit a baseball? I wonder what it would have been like to see characters on shows like Bonanza run around a baseball diamond. I know it would have been strange to Hoss Cartwright and Little Joe. You tell me.
In the summer of 1895, Singletree celebrated its 25th anniversary with a baseball game pitting a local team against a team of barnstorming professionals, the Excelsior Aces. While Singletree did not have an organized team, several area folks had played the game, and a couple had even seen the American Association's St. Louis Browns play in Sportsman's Park. The Excelsior Aces, however, were true professional ball players. True, most weren't not quite good enough to play in the American Association or the National League. Those that were usually had other, larger problems. Now, Crazy Joe Silver King, what a psycho he was. Ty Cobb called him the dirtiest player he'd ever seen. Once he ran from the field and into the crowd to beat up a handicapped heckler. Now, Crazy Joe, he ended up in Sing Sing prison for involuntary manslaughter. Seems he killed a restaurant cook in a brawl over an undercooked steak. Joe was very particular about his meat. And Moses Foster, he was smart as a whip, strong as an ox, a college graduate, and he could hit the ball a mile. He had quite a temper, though. Now, you see, to avoid racial incidents, especially in the southern states, promoters called him the Cuban. And he was just one of many early great black ball players that just couldn't cross baseball's unwritten color line. Now, Peach Pie O'Connor, he was the best hitter on the team, but he loved his food. Now, he was superstitious to a fault. He ate 2 plates of taters before every game. But in the summer of 1891, he injured himself badly sliding into second base with his eating utensils still in his back pocket. Most of the barnstormers were skilled enough for a career in the minor leagues, but rather than put up with rules and regulations and rigorous training schedules, they, as barnstormers, they could see different towns and different saloons and different women several times a week, and with little practice and even less attention to clean living, they could still easily win their games against unorganized town teams. This day, however, was to be just a bit different. The citizens of Singletree were so proud of their little town that nothing stood in the way of preparing for their Silver Jubilee. July morning was cool, promising perfect weather. For miles around, miners, ranchers, merchants, craftsmen, cowhands, they came knowing that for a few hours at least they could set their troubles aside and cut loose. And after filling their bellies with bean stew and homemade biscuits, fritters, and of course a few nips of corn whiskey, it was time for the pre-game show. Now, just before the game commenced, Singletree took the field to show off a bit itself. Several of the local town folk had dusted off their horns and drums, and they treated everyone to an original march composed just for the occasion. Then onto the field marched Singletree's 2 most popular citizens, Sam and Gracie. Everyone in the territory knew a little Samantha Ewan, who 5 years before lost her grandfather during a bank robbery, and there's the first citizen of Singletree herself, Gracie, Sam's grandfather's mule that had foiled the holdup that fateful day. They indeed both were the pride of Singletree. Crazy Joe Silver King, he got a bit distracted by all this, and seems most towns they visited wouldn't or couldn't put on such a show. But it wasn't just a show. Crazy Joe hated mules. It seemed he was kicked in the head more than once by such an animal when he was a child. Now, when the Aces took the field to warm up, the townsfolk crowded the third base line to see these marvelous athletes move with power and grace. Their black and red uniforms set them apart from the local players who wouldn't have had any way of identifying themselves were it not for the generous efforts of a local seamstress who made them all hats. The Aces business manager, Pepper Dean, was friends with mine owner and Singletree mayor, Wesley Rickey. After some negotiations, they agreed without the knowledge of the Aces players to stage today's event using the rules that were in place in the 1860s, you see, when Singletree was founded. So among other things, no gloves and no overhand pitching, and perhaps most important, a fly ball caught on one bounce was an out. This did not go over well with Crazy Joe Silver King or his players, but they wanted their paycheck at the end of the day, so the game commenced.
The team of professionals didn't like playing under the rules in the 1860s. The ball that was used in the 1890s is basically the same ball as today. The ball that was used in the 1860s is a larger ball, it's a much softer ball, did not travel as far, and therefore the guys that were playing in the 1890s didn't like using it.
Surprised the hometown team, while still being behind the Aces, they was putting up a real fight. This was not going to be the route the Aces were used to. So when the hothead team captain, Crazy Joe Silver King, stepped up to the line to face Singletree's pitcher, Cy McCall, he had blood in his eye. Now, hugging the third base line was the first citizen, Gracie, who sensed the striker's anger and knew just what to do to rattle him. Now, baseball's a funny game. Momentum can change in the blink of an eye. And on that fine afternoon with Crazy Joe Silver King at bat, it did. The town couldn't believe their eyes. Si McCall left the pitcher's line, and little Sam Ewing took matters into her own hands.
My great-grandfather worked for the C.A. Carter Ranch in Singletree, Montana. And it happened on that day that he was on his way into town to pick up Maggie Carter's daughter, Kate. And, of course, we know all what he observed is because Granddad kept a detailed journal. And this is actually what he wrote about that day. As we drew closer to the field, it was apparent that what had started out as a friendly contest had become a no-holds-barred free-for-all. I was ashamed for young Catherine on the day of her homecoming to witness such a display of human behavior at its basis. Whether the terrain had afforded me another route to the Carter Ranch.
When the dust settled in that little hollow near Singletree, Montana, the most prevalent injury was a bruised ego. Even though the Excelsior Aces had more runs on the board when the frenzy erupted, everyone in Singletree knew this was the day the Aces got trumped. Howdy, I'm John Gray, and welcome to Tales of the Wild West. As the 19th century came to a close, so too did the heyday of those infamous Western outlaws whose daring exploits for a quarter of a century fascinated readers from coast to coast. In fact, 1890s, the James brothers, the Daltons, Billy the Kid, the Younger brothers, among others, were either dead, in jail, or leading lives that were far from interesting enough to sell newspapers and dime novels. The ones that remained were journeyman bandits whose deeds, unlike their predecessors, failed to gain the imagination of the general public. A few bandits, however, gained public notoriety and were a little bit colorful. One such flamboyant individual was Jesus Miguel Sanchez, who, far from home, met his match in a small Montana town at the gun hand of a dauntless sheriff and under the hooves of one unforgiven mule.
As the West developed, rip-snorting, wide-open territories became more governable states. The boom towns got tamer and eventually attracted families and respectable businesses. Now, citizens demanded more law enforcement. As lawmen became more savvy, desperados had fewer places to hole up and a better than even chance of being recognized when they stepped out of the shadows. Life for the outlaw simply wasn't what it used to be.
With the danger of recognition more likely, the gangs had to constantly stay on the move to new territories. They needed safe havens to rest and to plan. As a result, the Sanchez gang and many of their contemporaries began to follow the sun, wintering in South Texas or Mexico, where they sometimes had families and even businesses. The gangs would head north as the weather warmed and the grass greened, refreshed and with healthy horses. They could live off the land while they sought out likely targets. The Sanchez gang may well have crossed paths with like-minded scoundrels such as the Brack Cornet gang or the Alvoyd Stiles boys. Both Burton Alvoyd and Billy Stiles, by the way, were former lawmen turned desperado. There was still often a very thin line between the lawless and the lawful. Outlaw gangs moved north along the states and territories until they reached as far north as Colorado, Wyoming, Montana by midsummer. Some gangs would track north along the eastern route and head back south, taking a western course. Others, maybe the Tom McCarthy gang or the Soapy Smith gang, would reverse the pattern. The goal was always fresh faces in new places. Rustle a few cows here, steal a few horses there, rob a stage if they saw one, or hit the jackpot with a poorly protected small town bank. Exactly what the Sanchez gang seemed to run across in Singletree, Montana, July 22nd, 1890.
The little mining and cattle town of Singletree had just opened a brand new bank. Its Victor Time Life safe held more money than the town had ever seen. Well, bank president Hamilton Cheney and his chief teller Wallace Bell were so puffed up over their exceptional week that at precisely 2 o'clock they closed the front door and headed to Georgia Lamb Saloon to crow a bit.
Wallace, a celebration is in order. Let us venture among the masses. Please, someplace else, children.
That's when Jesus Sanchez and his 4 sons rode into town. Why, it was like a circus, full of color and exotic faces, big sombreros, nickel-plated coats, silver bridles, proud men who feared nothing. Right in this here town. People in the streets just stopped and stared. Without a word to anyone, the vaqueros reined up by the livery. Their leader stepped down from his horse, threw saddlebags over his shoulder, and headed for Georgia Lamb Saloon, his Spanish route spurs raking the dirt. He was here for business.
Keep to yourself for a while?
Thanks, Doc.
Friday afternoons in Georgia's saloon were sort of reserved for the town's important folk. While most of the miners and cowhands were still at work, the likes of prosperous cattlemen Charles Carter and Granville Stewart and Cyrus McCall would swap stories with Doc Milburn or try their hand at the faro table while their sons took in the sights. A Georgia Lamb calico queen was a sight worth taking in, and Georgia Lamb herself Now, she was picture pretty and knew how to keep her men coming back.
The entrepreneurial woman of the late 19th century had few outlets available to her. One of the best and most lucrative was to own a brothel. The names of many of these industrious women are still known to this day. Madame Dora Dufresne was a legend in Deadwood. She was a friend of, and in fact an employer of, Calamity Jane. She was so successful that she opened branch offices in Sturgis, Rapid City, and Belle Fourche. Molly Johnson was another fixture in Deadwood. All of Molly's girls were blonde, thus earning her the title of Queen of the Blondes. Now, down in Texas, the English-born Fanny Porter was running an establishment that was a regular stop of the Wild Bunch. In fact, Harry Longabout, who is better known as the Sundance Kid, met his female companion Etta Place at Fanny's. One of the West's most colorful madams, Mary Elizabeth Haley, known to all as Squirrel Tooth Alice, opened her business in Sweetwater, Texas, after many years of being a traveling bandit. Alice had 9 children, all of whom ended up on the wrong side of the law. She lived to the ripe old age of 98. So much for clean living. Montana's most famous beneficiary of being a soiled dove, as the women were known, and then later managing soiled doves, was Josephine Hensley, frequently called Chicago Joe because it was in Chicago where Josephine earned enough money so that she could follow the gold strikes to Montana. Her first Helena brothel was in a log cabin. Singletree's popular Georgia Lamb was one of Chicago Joe's most sought-after doves, and she was able to quickly amass enough money to open her own place in the little mining and cattle town.
Close the bar, Sam.
Bar's closed.
Closed? It ain't Sunday.
Georgia was a very astute businesswoman, and before long she owned not just the saloon, but also many other businesses in town. She was smart enough to sell all her holdings in Singletree at the height of its prosperity. Then she took that money and she invested it in the stock market. She also had the foresight to sell all her holdings in the stock market right before the 1929 stock market crash, and she lived out her days in Los Angeles, a very wealthy woman.
Jesus Miguel Sanchez had a plan. He and his sons would leave Montana with the deposits to the State Bank of Singletree without firing a single shot. All he had to do was make a deposit of his own.
Señores, señoritas, Jesus Miguel Sanchez is very far from home. Me and my son, we just sold 50 of my best caballos, and we wish to share all this fortune with you by one round for everybody. Come, let's celebrate. Hey, barman, the best in the house for mis amigos aquí.
Now, one man Jesus Sanchez hadn't counted on was Sheriff Matthew McKenna, the no-nonsense peace officer of Singletree. Now, he was an easygoing sort, but for some reason you knew not to push him too far. Even cowboys that wanted to howl at the moon on payday knew they would probably wake up behind bars the next morning.
Marshal. Te lo dije, mijo. We don't have nothing to worry about. A nice bank to put nuestro dinero, and a nice marshal to protect it. Come, jefe. Have a drink with me. Celebrate with Jesus Miguel.
It's sheriff. I'm a sheriff. Another time for the drink.
Oh, duty. Now I like this man. Jefe, my sons and I, we have to leave muy pronto to pick up some horses that we bought in the spring. Would you put this money in your bank until we come back?
Bank's closed.
Por favor, jefe. Will you guard her until we come back?
Not on your life.
Por favor, jefe. My sons and me, we have to leave muy pronto.
Matthew, I think we can accommodate Mr. Sanchez.
I thought that fancy Victor safe of yours has some kind of time locks.
Oh, it does, Sheriff. But we have 20 minutes before...
Now, Bank President Hamilton Cheney, he was always more than ready to find room for a few more dollars in his overstuffed bank. Now, he was stepping all over himself to accommodate
Cheney.
the big Mexican.
Hamilton Cheney, President of the Citizens Bank of Singletree, first banks in statehood. At your service, sir.
Why, him and Wally Bell just took them boys across the street and opened up the door.
Hey, senor. Kenny, bring me those papers so I can sign those papers. El hombre del banco took almost all my dinero. But I still have some over here for mis amigos and my señoritas. Por favor, jefe. Have a drink with me. It would be rude to refuse a drink from an amigo, huh?
Another time.
Even though Jesus tried as he might to keep the sheriff's attention, McKenna began to smell a polecat. Things just weren't adding up.
Por favor, jefe. Siéntese. Very good with this pistol, huh? And you and that table, keep those hands and those drinks. After all, I pay for those drinks, right? It would have made me very sad to kill a friend. Sit. Siéntese, por favor. And put that gun on that table.
Now, mind you, people outside didn't think too much about a few shots coming from inside Georgia Lamb's saloon, but when Hamilton and Wiley left the bank with their hands high and guns at the back, the story changed. As fate would have it, coming around the corner was a real familiar face in Singletree. Salvatore Ewing had been prospecting in the hills around town even before there was a town. He would come in every couple weeks or so to get supplies and buy his little granddaughter Sam, that'd be short for Samantha, some rock candy, and this time it was for a pair of brand new boots. Now when Sal rounded that corner and caught the glint of Ricardo Sanchez's nickel-plated coat, he didn't have time to think. He scared young Sanchez so bad the young outlaw just fired in the direction of the sound. Now, Jesus held a tight rein inside Georgia Lamb's saloon, but he didn't expect to hear a shot from outside. Sheriff McKenna read him like a book. The moment Sanchez dropped his gaze, McKenna was on him like a rattlesnake on a hot rock. Old Sal was down, and it seems that the mule she was riding, Gracie by name, didn't take too kindly to her family being shot at. Decided to take matters into her own hooves.
I've been fooling with mules a long time, and I know people get this concept of stubborn as a mule, but from my experience with them, when they get stubborn about anything, something's not right. Something's just not right. They're a sure-footed animal, and if you look back through history, you know, we got generals that rode mules, and George Washington, you know, he loved his mules. They were royalty. I mean, a mule is a hard animal to beat. The mule just seems like it watches after itself and the people around them.
Gracie first took off after Ricardo Sanchez, who dropped the money bag thinking the devil himself was pursuing him. Now, Miguel Sanchez abandoned his brother and snatched up the money bag. Hoping to reach his father, Miguel hightailed it to the saloon, only to find a shot-up father and a special welcoming committee. Chavez, who was guarding the horses, decided that things were too hot to stay around. And kind of beat up by Gracie, Ricardo got to his horse and him and Antonio got clean away. Citizens of Singletree just weren't the marksmen their sheriff was.
Doc, we need you quick. Damnedest thing I ever saw.
You're pretty good with that paper, Tony. I think that I teach you.
As Doc Milburn treated old Sal, Sam and Gracie stuck close to the man they loved. Gracie, the smartest mule in all of Montana, had saved the little town of Singletree.
The foiled robbery spelled the end of the Sanchez gang. With Jesus and his son Miguel incarcerated at Deer Lodge, the other three sons headed back to Mexico to be with their mother and take care of the family business. They dropped their outlaw ways. Well, two of them got into politics, so maybe they didn't drop them altogether. Jesus eventually returned to Mexico, but some say after he was set free, he returned to Singletree to apologize to Sheriff McKenna and Hamilton Cheney, and likely to spend a few hours at Georgia Lamb's saloon. Matthew McKenna remained Singletree's stalwart sheriff for another 15 years, and little Samantha Ewing grew up to break many a young man's heart. And Gracie? Well, Gracie never lost her place of honor. The town, like all things, changed, but Gracie wasn't much for progress. She was happy to live out her years as first citizen of Singletree. Now, you all drop by again sometime.
Howdy, partners. Welcome to a special edition of Tales of the Wild West, featuring cowboy legend Johnny Crawford. Johnny Crawford is best known for portraying Lucas McCain's son, Mark, on the Rifleman TV show. But Johnny appeared in many other TV series and films such as The Big Valley, Rawhide, Wagon Train, and many more. So let's mosey down the trail to the set of the new feature film, Bill Tillman and the Outlaws, where Johnny is set to portray legendary cowboy film star William S. Hart. So throw another log on the fire as we get reacquainted with Johnny Crawford.
Hi, I'm Robert Neal Marshall, and I'm here on the set of Bill Tillman and the Outlaws with a very special guest. We have Johnny Crawford, a fame for the Rifleman, a musician in his own right, fabulous career, and you're playing a very special role in this movie.
Yes, I'm a big fan of the most popular Western actor in the
whole world, really, America.
Yeah.
Yeah, William S. Hart, right?
Yeah.
And that's you. So that was something very special for you to do this role because of that?
Yeah, when I always loved Westerns, Westerns and musicals.
There is a man who is a director, a writer, a producer, and he's also America's favorite cowboy. Mr. Masterson, if you please. The the remarkable man of the West, William S. Hart.
Make the West live for us all.
What was it about this movie that made you want to come play with us in Bill Tillman and the Outlaws?
Well, I was a big fan of William S. Hart.
Okay.
And his steely eyes, you know.
There you go.
And I couldn't resist. William S. Hart was an author too.
Right.
And I have both his books like
Materials.
Life,
yeah.
East and West, and they are autographed to his friends.
Wow.
That worked with him.
That's incredible. And he really was. He was the biggest Western star at that time.
Yeah, he's highly regarded.
Right. And he only did silent movies, really, supposedly, right? In the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Silent films. I went and saw all the present movies,
right.
the current stuff, but there was something special about seeing silent films, and because they were so unique.
Was that an influence to you then as a child to then go into acting, to then go to these auditions and to start getting out there?
Well, yeah. Spent a lot of time thinking about Marilyn Monroe, but...
And you thought maybe by getting in the movies you would get to meet her?
Yeah.
Probably for real.
Yeah.
Did you? You never did get to meet her?
I came very close.
You did?
Yes. I went. I had an audition at MGM for a movie that she was going to do, and I didn't get to meet her, but I was
that close,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm sure everyone asks you this over and over and over again, but you know, the Rifleman as a kid, working with Chuck Connors and doing a TV show on a regular basis. What was that like from the perspective as a child? Was that just work, or did you have fun? What was it like for you to do that every week?
We had a good time. We had a great rapport.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember the first time I met him in an office at Hal Roach Studios.
Oh, wow.
That's
yeah.
where that was it.
Little Rascals.
Yeah.
Right, of course.
I was introduced to him, and we read a scene together.
Right.
And he stood up, and I was very confident until he stood up, because
that's height.
If I'm going to be working with him, they'll only see this
part of you.
Yeah, part of me.
Oh, that's great.
But he took a liking to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how you got the part, or did you already have the part at that point?
No, but I knew I had a good chance.
You were in the right,
because they called me back. You know.
Right.
My mother would pick me up at school, and I was 10 years old.
Wow.
And she would have the proper clothing in the back seat,
ready to go,
for me to fall in. When we started the Rifleman, Monty Montana came on the set, and he was driving. He was going to drive the stagecoach into the thing, and I had seen him at my grammar school when I was younger.
So, but he was inspiration to you to get to work with the man.
Well,
then.
yeah, because you know I like to go hiking, and he educated me, started right away, telling me things like, when you wake up in the morning out on the range, you always turn your you turn your boots upside down, so you don't.
There's nothing like spiders or bugs in them, right? Or scorpions or
snakes.
Snakes. Okay. How did you learn to be such a strong actor? Where did you get that sensibility?
Well, there was early television.
Right.
There were dramas done live, matinee theater.
Oh,
was on
right.
At,
Sure.
NBC matinee theater. I got 15 jobs doing matinee theater.
Wow, amazing.
I loved doing those things. They were.
Yeah.
It was exciting.
Yeah. Now, what about school? Did you have tutors on the set all the time, or did you get a break, or did you go to school in between? How did that work?
I would get, assignments.
Right.
And then we would rehearse an hour of time. I would learn the script.
Right.
Yeah. And I enjoyed the challenge.
But apart from the Riflemen and all of that incredible time, you are a brilliant musician in your own right. And you have albums, and you tour, and you had a band. Could you talk a little bit about some of the music that really influenced you and what you loved about that?
Well, I saw all the musicals I could,
Sure.
And I collected sheet music, and I was lucky because my grandfather was a song plugger.
Oh, okay.
And from the beginning of the century.
The whole era, wow.
And everybody in a family had musical
Had the backgrounds, right.
Yeah.
So it was a heavy influence on you. So you grew up with this in your life all the time.
Yeah, but I never met him.
You never did, but
No.
he's with you.
He's with me.
Yeah.
Lennox Avenue is known for doing the lowdown, but you'll find they're not alone in doing the lowdown. Fifth Avenue.
Next, we have the scriptwriter, screenwriter for Bill Tillman and the Outlaws, Dan Searles, who'd like to meet you in person, officially on tape here. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right, Dan, so please come on in. Johnny Crawford. Dan.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
So one of the things people really don't know about you that I think they may find quite interesting is you actually had a rodeo career. I mean, you played a cowboy on movies and whatnot. So your event was roping.
Yeah, I loved roping, and I had friends that helped me on the Riflemen that were real cowboys, and I was such a big fan of that.
So steer roping.
So steer roping is another part of that, but I can do a butterfly like this.
So you rode a bull?
I rode more than one bull.
So what's the trick to riding a bull?
Stay in the middle.
Don't fall off.
Don't fall off. Stay in the middle, and don't let him throw you.
Yeah, and then don't get him too angry.
Well, that's neat. Thanks for sharing that. That's just an awesome part of your life, to just know that not only one of the iconic cowboy characters, but you can really do it, and that's awesome. Great.
I appreciate
it. Good talking to you.
Thank you. And Johnny, I know we're going to give you more surprises. We are so thrilled, but again, it's a very small world. And another actor on the film, Sidney Blackmer, is going to join us. And Sidney has a very special connection to you and the Riflemen as well. Sidney, come on in and meet Johnny more officially.
Pleasure.
Sydney.
Great pleasure.
Thanks.
I have a photograph of episode 18 with you, Chuck Connors, and my dad, when he played Judge Hannafin.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you, I've written it to Wayne, so if you will autograph it, I can give this to Wayne and talk a little bit while you're signing that.
Yeah, here's how you hold
it. Like that. Got it.
We're about the same age, and I was growing up in North Carolina because my dad wanted to give us the same traditional upbringing that he had, and therefore we probably would have met in Hollywood had he chosen to have his family raised there. And I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to meet there, but it's a great pleasure to see you here. This is episode 18, And behind it, as soon as I'll let you sign that so we make sure we get a nice autograph on it. This is from episode 1, season 1, and you'll see my father and you, Chuck Connors, and R.G. Armstrong. And what's interesting about this photo is my father went to Carolina, the University of North Carolina, in 1912. R.G. Armstrong went to school with Andy Griffith in 1949 at Chapel Hill.
That's great.
But it's a great pleasure to meet you. I enjoyed watching you on that horse. It was wonderful. And a pleasure to see you. And it's only been 60 years since you worked with my dad. And I'm happy to say that I had a chance to work with you 60 years later.
What a great actor he was. He was so perfect in this role.
And unfortunately, he was going to be a continuing character in the series, but he was on Broadway with Paul Newman and Geraldine Page in Sweet Bird of Youth at the same time. And that, of course, his great love was Broadway, although he made many Westerns. And another connection, my mother made a motion picture called Phantom Ranger with Tim McCoy, who was another very famous cowboy actor. And this was his return to the screen after a long hiatus. And to see him on a white horse in that film, you must see that. It's incredible how that man, just like he belonged on that horse, just like it was floating on the air. Thank you again. Great pleasure.
Sydney Blackmore, everybody. And Sydney, thank you for being, and it's great working with you on Bill Tillman and the Outlaws as well.
You would
great honor.
be a great judge.
And Lawrence Whitener as well.
Well, I was a prosecutor for 25 years. I could certainly tell you how a judge would act.
To play that.
Wow.
So, yeah, I held it right. Thank you. Thank you for the lesson. I got my first rope lesson from Johnny Crawford. That's pretty cool. Johnny, thank you so much for being part of Bill Tillman and the Outlaws, and for spending this fabulous day with us, and for teaching us and sharing a little bit of your life and your story with the crowds and us. And it's just an honor to work with you, sir.
Well,
thank you. Johnny Crawford, ladies and gentlemen. A real original. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You were very brave.
In the late 1800s, the West was certainly not as wild as it was the first decades after the Civil War. And near the turn of the century, young men had more options of what they could do to put food on the table if they had chosen to settle down. Many paths, however, did not seem exciting enough for the restless soul. All too often, searching for a rightful place in the world led to petty crime, which unchecked could lead to living the life of an outlaw. Fortunately for most, fate conspires to provide a path to fulfillment. Such was the fortune of Robert Lowe.
you are. I was getting worried. Are you hungry?
No.
Are you okay?
I'm here.
Why are you so late?
I was out at Northridge. There was a gunfight. It was bad.
Why on earth would you go up there?
I don't think you want to know.
Well, that may be, Robert, but I think I need to hear. Please don't start keeping secrets from me. Oh, for goodness sake.
I met with Paul West.
Paul West? Why on earth would you meet with him?
I heard he was looking for someone good with a gun to ride into Mexico with him. Thought I'd see what he had to offer.
What could that man possibly offer that we need?
Look around, Mary. We got nothing. I can't find decent work and we need money.
Robert, we have everything that we need.
You sure about that?
I'm sure we have a roof over our heads and clothes on our backs. You hunt and I have a garden and we have each other. Do we really need anything else?
Surviving. That's all we're doing. It's not enough for me, and I don't believe it's enough for you.
I'm happy with the way things are. I don't need fancy clothes or fine furniture.
No, I need to do better providing for you. And I need a purpose.
Well, I promise you'll not find that riding with Paul West. That can only lead to damnation. And I believe redemption is what you're looking for.
Now you just sound like your preacher daddy.
And what's wrong with that? You said yourself my daddy was the wisest man you've ever known.
Maybe he was. He never thought I was good enough for you. Looks like I'm just proving him right.
Oh, don't be ridiculous. You're the man I love. And that's what I need. You just need to find what fulfills you. You know, Robert, if you wanted, you could be someone this town depends on. The way they do on Bill. You've known him forever, and you know as well as I do he took in his share of wild nights and drinking when he was younger.
We did kick it up a bit back then.
But look at him now. People depend on him to keep things straight in this town. They respect him. Maybe you should go talk to him.
I need to put up my horse. Think.
Robert Lowe. It's been a while, compadre.
Yeah, I guess.
What brings you in this evening?
Oh, just out walking and thinking. Realized I was out front and I knew you'd be in here, so thought I'd come in and jaw a bit.
I'm glad you did. Say, did you hear about what happened over at North Ridge today?
Yeah, heard about something going on out there.
Yeah, Paul West and his bunch. You know, got all shot up. One of his men got away. but nobody got a good look at him. Well, otherwise, his face might be on one of these in the morning.
Yeah, he's lucky. We're blessed. Hey, Bill, can I ask you a question?
Always.
Why did you want to be the law?
What do you mean?
What made you decide that being the marshal was what you wanted to do?
Oh, I saw a need, I guess. Somebody's got to keep things straight in this town. Why are you asking?
I don't know. Trying to figure some stuff out.
Well, the way I see it, somebody's got to give these folks a decent place to live. When Marshal Samuels moved on, well, I thought I might be up to it. Plus, I rather enjoy the respect that folks give me around here. When we were younger, I never thought that would have happened. Let's face it, not that long ago, you and I could have been sharing a cell together.
We did have some wild times.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's in the past now. Although I gotta admit, I'm still a little bit worried about you. Well, until you settle down with Mary. She's a strong, solid woman. It's just what you needed.
Yeah, I know I'm lucky to have her in my life. But I don't know what she sees in me.
Well, you've got a good heart, Robert Lowe. You're a good man. I think most folks believe that. And don't worry. You'll find it. Just like I did.
Find what?
Well, your purpose. Your way. Say, Robert, would you mind sticking around here a bit? Charlie's up in Harmony. And he's escorting the... Well, look, I've got to make my rounds. And I ain't had nothing to eat all day. And there's big doings tomorrow.
Sure, Bill. Take your time.
Any friends of yours in here?
Bunch of lost souls right there.
Yeah. You in here?
If not, I should be.
What'd you do?
Killed a man.
Why?
Stupidity.
What's your name?
Oh, what's the matter what my name is? Tomorrow I'll swing. It'll be like I was never even here.
That's one way to look at it.
My name's Carter. It's Josiah Carter.
Robert Lowe. So what happened?
I didn't set out to do it, but... Well, what's the matter? There ain't no excuse for what I've done and now I gotta pay.
You got any family?
No. My folks been gone a while now. I ain't got no brothers or sisters. I got an aunt up in Montana, but... I ain't never met her. No one's gonna miss me when I'm gone.
So how'd you end up killing a man?
It's a long story.
Well, I got plenty of time.
Well, like I said, it was stupid. I was just looking for some thrills, money. Started off hustling folks at cards, rustling cattle, whatever I wanted. Never stopped to bother to think about what kind of hurt I was causing folks. It was easy at first. Before long, I started thinking I was entitled. All that stuff I was taking. That I somehow deserved it and that nothing I was doing was wrong. I ended up killing someone who got in my way. I regretted it the second it happened. I just wasn't thinking straight.
You say you regret what you did. You try to convince the judge, let him see how sorry you are for everything?
Yeah, I tried as hard as I could to make the judge see I was sorry and wanted to change my ways, but there ain't no letting a man off who's killed for no good reason. I think the judge saw that I was sorrowful, but like I said.
Sorry your life turned out this way. I think you were a decent man not long ago.
Yeah, I think maybe I was, yeah. It seems like it's been forever since I've done anything decent in my life.
I'm sorry there's no one to mourn or remember you.
Hell, I wasted my life. Probably best there ain't no one to remember me. Hey. Hey, maybe. If it's not asking too much, maybe you could remember me? Better yet, forgive me for what I've done?
Me forgive you? That don't make sense. You haven't done anything to me.
Well, yeah, but well, if you can forgive me, it'll let me go to the gallows a bit of peace of my good-for-nothing soul.
Maybe you need to talk to a preacher.
No preacher. Not swing at dawn. Please. Taking a man's life is unforgivable, but the Bible says God will forgive me.
Well, if the Bible says God will forgive you, why do you need my forgiveness?
Because I need to know that at least one person on this earth understands. And if you can forgive me, I know he will too. Would you at least pray with me?
Not sure I know how to pray.
Well, it's easy. I'll show you. Here, right here. We'll recite the 23rd Psalm together. Here, you can use my Bible. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me on the path of righteousness, in his name's sake. Yea, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. For thou art with me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. To you for sitting with me. It's done me all the good it can, and I'll rest more peaceful knowing you have it.
For what it's worth, I forgive you. The Bible says, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Think about that. As you move about our town today, and you see people who have made bad choices in their lives, don't look down upon them with disdain and judgment. Look upon them with understanding and forgiveness in your hearts. For they are human, just like us. No better, no worse than the person sitting next to you. They do not deserve disgust nor glorification. Right now, they're paying penance for their sins. So let them realize that forgiveness is within the hearts of their neighbors, and that it's waiting for them when they have paid their penance and find themselves moving freely among us once again. Lord, we ask that you help us to live your words every day of our lives. Amen.